Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for the fantasy football playoffs. Welcome back. We are breaking down week 15, going through every single game, talking about all of the relevant matchups to help you guys set your fantasy football lineups. This is matchups that matter, where I go through over-unders and spreads and pace of play and all the good stuff you guys need to make your lineup decisions. This one, obviously more crucial than any other week that we're going to look at because it is the fantasy playoffs. So, let's get things kicked off. We do have all teams active this week, 32 teams, no buys, which means 16 games. The split is a little bit different than usual. We have 1 Thursday night game, 7 1 p.m. games, 5 4 p.m. games, and then also a Sunday night game and a Monday night doubleheader on this Monday. So starting with Thursday Night Football, we have the Rams at the 49ers. The 49ers 3-point home favorites against the Rams. The over-under set quite high at 49.5 points. That is the second highest total on the entire slate. The under is catching a little bit of the steam, but a lot of the games are catching the under this week. Pace of play is pretty slow. These teams both operate pretty run-heavy offenses, but the DVOA advantage for San Francisco is actually quite in their favor. Given how bad San Francisco is this year, we kind of would have considered them to be a little bit underwhelming, but they actually do profile pretty well in this game. As far as key matchups to pay attention to, the way that this game is probably going to go is that you have Purdy, Debo, and Jennings with good matchups. And given the recent comments we've seen from Debo Samuel and the fact that Jennings went off against the Rams last time they played against them, I think the passing game will probably have a decent outing this week. The other side of things, Puka, Stafford, and Cooper Kupp, they have a little bit of a tougher matchup. So we saw a bonanza for Cooper Kupp, Matthew Stafford, and Puka Nacua last week against the Bills. Don't think it'll quite be like that, especially on the road in San Francisco. Kyron Williams versus the San Francisco run defense, about a league average matchup for him there. Isaac Guerrero, who is probably going to play tonight based on all the reports I've seen so far. A little bit risky given the foot injury he's coming off of, but the Los Angeles Rams run defense is exploitable, so he can be in your lineup as like a high-end flex start, low-end RB2 in a pinch. Start George Kittle and both kickers as well. So pretty cut and dry there. A lot of fantasy relevant players. Over-under is expected to be very high. Like I said, 49.5 points. So you're probably starting most guys and avoiding the defenses and probably firing up the kickers. So getting into the first of 7 1 p.m. games, we have the Cowboys at Panthers. The Panthers are 2.5-point home favorites, which is a little wild considering Carolina hasn't been favored in a number of weeks, but they are favored against this Cowboys team because they've been playing better. They took the Eagles down to the wire, the Bucs down to the wire, the Chiefs down to the wire in consecutive weeks. Definitely could see them winning this game. The pace of play very high in this one, even if the over-under and the under catching a lot of the steam is not an overly friendly game environment. There still should be some fantasy relevant guys here. In the key matchups department of this game, we have both quarterbacks having a top 5 matchup. Given that there are no buys, I can't imagine outside of Superflex formats you'd be forced to start Bryce Young or Cooper Rush, but they do both have good matchups, which is good for their weapons. Rico Dowdle versus the Carolina run defense. This profiles as an awesome game for him. He's been great the last couple of weeks, so he is definitely going to be in a lot of your guys' lineups this week. Chuba Hubbard, again, now alone in the backfield without Jonathan Brooks for the rest of the season, and we'll see what happens even with Raheem Blackshear, the second running back right now. Chuba Hubbard profiles a very good start this week as well. CeeDee Lamb, a little bit of a tougher matchup, but he's CeeDee Lamb, so you're going to be firing him up given the target volume he's seen, basically double-digit targets in like 80 to 90% of his games this year. Adam Thielen and Xavier Legette, 23rd ranked matchup, are the Dallas Cowboys. So if you did need a flex wide receiver start, I think Adam Thielen is my preference of the two because he's been the consistent chain mover and PPR guy, whereas Legette more of your big play threat. He was close to a big game last week. He did end up dropping that would-be touchdown to beat the Eagles, but we didn't quite see him secure that there. Jake Ferguson has a great matchup. If you guys are looking for a tight end streamer, I think he is a very good option, especially because Cooper Rush has a good matchup. And again, when we can profile these games out for Cooper Rush and the Cowboys, they usually do perform at a pretty high level, as we saw for the Bengals and Cowboys game last Monday night, and both kickers also very solid starts in this game. So moving into the Chiefs at Browns, the Chiefs are 4-point favorites. They're implied for 24 points. The over-under set at 44, and the over actually catching quite a bit of the steam. The pace of play is very strong, and the Kansas City Chiefs have a nice advantage on offense. The key matchups to pay attention to, this one's a little bit wonky because even though it stacks up really well for the Chiefs players are not like overly fantasy friendly right now. Really, outside of Travis Kelce, you don't have a difference maker at their position, but Patrick Mahomes maybe a viable starter, even though he is a top 12 defense against fantasy quarterbacks. DeAndre Hopkins and Xavier Worthy in a pinch as a flex wide receiver definitely makes some sense there. On the other side of things, you have Jerry Jeudy, who's been playing at a super, super high level, who is definitely in everybody's lineups. Cedric Tillman appears that he's going to be tracking to play this week, coming off of a concussion where he's missed the last 2 games. That is great news for him because I think he is a viable flex option in this game as well. Also worth noting that David Njoku is not practicing with a hamstring injury right now, and I would expect him to be out, as does a lot of the Cleveland Browns beat writers, which is the thing I've been reading up on here. So keep that in mind. If you do have David Njoku, you're probably going to have to go look elsewhere at the tight end position. Both running backs have bottom 8 matchups as well. So with Isaiah Pacheco and Nick Chubb, these guys are both kind of the same. They're both coming off of injuries. They're both not really playing at the level that we wanted to see them play at, especially coming into the year and just in their previous times during their career. I feel pretty confident that neither of them are must-start players. Pacheco over Chubb for sure, but not a guarantee that you need to start either of these guys. Pacheco is probably going to see another bump in his workload, though, so maybe he's top 25, top 30 running back play, but Chubb a little bit worried about given the split with Jerome Ford, given the bad matchup there. Dolphins at Texans. This one's going to be really, really interesting. We got two, Shanahan disciples, Bobby Slowick and Mike McDaniel going at each other here. The Texans are 3-point home favorites. Pretty high scoring game here, 47-point over-under. The under is catching a large majority of the steam, though. And this one's a wonky game because if you look at the two defenses, you have the Texans, who are like pass funnel of all pass funnels. It's really hard to run against them, but it is quite easy to pass against them. And then the Dolphins are the complete opposite, where it's really hard to pass against them, but it's very easy to run against them. Now, the way that this game kind of stacks up, both teams are good at the opposite thing, right? You have the Texans, who are very good at running the ball, and that profiles well against Miami. It's going to be a big-time Joe Mixon game, if I had to guess. And then vice versa, the Dolphins, who are facing a pass funnel defense, going up against the Texans, I do think that Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle will be well set up to have good games, along with Tua Tagovailoa in this one. Keep in mind that Tyreek Hill and Nico Collins are both expected to see shadow coverage from the respective number one corner of the other team, Derek Stingley on Tyreek Hill, and Nico Collins versus Jalen Ramsey. The tight end position in this game, because of the scoring environment, I do think Jonnu Smith is definitely a very good option. And even Dalton Schultz, if, for example, you lose David Njoku this week and you had to dumpster dive for a tight end, I don't think Dalton Schultz is a very bad option, especially knowing that Nico Collins might have a tougher matchup on the outside versus Jalen Ramsey. Tank Dell's been a little bit inconsistent, so maybe we see Dalton Schultz have a pretty good game in this one. Moving on to the New York Jets at Jacksonville Jaguars here. The Jets are 3.5-point road favorites against Mac Jones and the Jaguars. This game does not profile as a very high-scoring one. It is the lowest over-under on the slate at just 40.5 points. The under actually catching quite a bit of the steam, but the saving grace here is that the Jets offense and the Jags offense both actually have positive DVOA matchups, so maybe we see a little bit more points than we're expecting, especially given the up-tempo nature of both of these offenses. The key matchups to pay attention to: the passing game for the Jets, very good spot for them. Aaron Rodgers, Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams, especially those two receivers are going to be in your lineup, but even Aaron Rodgers, if you were down bad at quarterback or if it's a super flex league, you definitely would feel comfortable starting him. Brian Thomas and Evan Ingram are the two really relevant pass catchers for Jacksonville. Not good matchups for either guy, but as a top 30-ish play at wide receiver, a top 10 to 12 play at tight end, I suppose you could do worse in this matchup. The running game for the Jets is a mystery right now because Breece Hall is still dealing with the MCL sprain that he suffered against the Colts before the bye. If he's out again, we did see a 50-50 split of the backfield between Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis. So whoever kind of you want to throw into your lineup, I do think they're more so low-end RB2s as opposed to high-end RB1s, unless Breece Hall were to be playing in this game. So just keep that in mind. If you do have Braylon Allen, if you do have Isaiah Davis, it's an excellent matchup for those guys, but they did split the work pretty much 50-50 down the middle. And then Travis Etienne, Tank Bigsby, speaking of 50-50s, also probably not in play for a lot of people, just given that nobody's on bye this week, and Etienne and Tank are not really the best options, especially with Mac Jones playing quarterback. If you're looking for a defense, I think the Jets defense is a very solid option because Mac Jones is Mac Jones, and then the kicker for the Jets, also a very solid option as well. So moving into the Commanders at Saints here. Commanders 7.5-point road favorites going up against Jake Haener, presumably, and the New Orleans Saints. Derek Carr broke his hand or something like that, so he is going to be out for the rest of the year. The over is catching a lot of steam. It's a good pace of play matchup. The DVOAs stack up pretty well, but the over-under isn't very high, and that New Orleans DVOA is a little fugazi without Derek Carr there. So going to be an interesting game environment. I think the Commanders probably get right in this one. Haven't really seen an explosion from them in a while, and I think we might see that. Both quarterbacks, average matchups, but you're not starting Jake Haener and you are starting Jaden Daniels. Brian Robinson versus the New Orleans Saints run defense. Awesome matchup for him. He is probably going to have a really good matchup and a really good game in this one. He has not been healthy pretty much since like week 4, and him having a bye was pretty crucial, I think, for his knee injuries, his shoulder injuries, his rib. Like, he's been dealing with so many different things this year, so him coming back healthy against a really easy run defense profiles really well for him. Alvin Kamara he has the best workload in the league according to Fantasy Life, so you start him even if Jake Haener is the quarterback, which it looks like he will be. Terry McLaurin, great matchup versus the New Orleans Saints pass defense. This is a revenge game, actually, for Marshawn Lattimore, who appears to be making his debut for the Commanders. Zach Ertz, also a decent streamer. If you're looking for a tight end option, you lose Njoku or something. I think Zach Ertz is a great option, given the implied point total for the Commanders is up over 25 points. And then if you're looking for a defense, I do think the Washington defense, even though they're not the greatest real-life unit in the league, Jake Haener could definitely give them some, ducks or whatever for them to pick off some passes. And the kicker for the Commanders, also a very decent play. So Ravens at Giants, this one's a crazy spread. 14.5 points for the Ravens. The Giants are a dumpster fire, not even starting Drew Lock in this game. They're going to be rolling with Tommy DeVito. Pretty straightforward here. The Giants defense is a little bit better than people give it credit for. And also, too, this just kind of profiles as a game the Ravens will take care of. And it'll be Derrick Henry up the gut 25 times in this game. Lamar Jackson, Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, and Mark Andrews. The worry that you'd have for those guys is that the game is not close. And in the second half, they're just running Derrick Henry and Justice Hill. Whereas in the first half, you'd want them to be, throwing the ball like crazy. And Lamar's best games this year, Flowers' best games, some of those guys' best games, have come in shootouts. They have not come where the Ravens put up 30 points, but the game is over by the third quarter or whatever. So I think we could see a blowout here, given how bad the Giants are. Malik Neighbors is going to be in your lineup. They could be, playing catch up in some garbage time points there. He is just getting way too many targets. He leads the NFL with a 35% target share. For you to not play him, especially in the 30th ranked pass defense matchup versus the Ravens. Tyrone Tracy, I would be a little worried about starting because it's a tough matchup and he could get game scripted out of this game. But there's a good chance that if you have Tyrone Tracy, you probably have to play him, given, he's like a top 24 play still. But if you do have like a number of great running backs and you wanted to sit Tyrone Tracy, I don't think it's an outrageous thing to do so in this game. So moving to the Bengals at Titans, this is the Brian Callahan revenge game. Going to be a lot of interesting dynamic at this one because there's a lot of familiarity with the two schemes and the two offensive coaching staffs here. The Bengals are 5-point road favorites against Tennessee, who just lost to the Jaguars. So not a great look for them last week. They probably should have won that game easily. The over-under is 46.5 points. I kind of actually like the over in this game, even if the sharps are saying that the under is basically a lock, given how much money is on the under relative to the public betting. But the Bengals and Titans, key matchups to pay attention to. You have Will Levis, Calvin Ridley, and Nick Westbrook-Akine with the 29th easiest pass defense in the NFL. So that's kind of why I like the over in this game. Usually for overs to hit, you need both teams to be scoring. And I know that Cincinnati is going to score because they're the Bengals, and Chase and Burrow and Higgins have been on fire as of late. But Levis, Ridley, and Nick Westbrook-Akine, I could see putting up some decent points in this one. Joe Burrow and the pass catchers for the Bengals. A little bit of a tougher matchup specifically for Chase and Higgins, but Burrow should be able to get it done, getting people the ball in space, finding the matchups that he needs to find. The Tennessee pass defense has been a lot better when L'Jarius Sneed is in the lineup, and he is not currently in the lineup right now, so I think that they should be exploitable in this one. Both Chase Brown and Tony Pollard are in your lineup. They are pretty good options, even if they have below average matchups in this one. And if you are looking for a defense and a kicker, I think the Bengals for both of those would make a lot of sense there. So gearing out of the 1 p.m. window here into the 4 p.m. window, I love the way that this is set up. It sets up perfectly for those of you guys that watch Red Zone. You get 7 games at 1 p.m. and then at 4 p.m. you get 5 more games. So you got a pretty jam-packed day of football on Sunday. Patriots at Cardinals is the first game in that window. The Cardinals are 6-point home favorites. Their DVOA is actually the second best advantage of any team on the entire Week 15 slate, so keep that in mind. Kyler Murray, Marvin Harrison, and Trey McBride should all have pretty good matchups here. The 22nd ranked pass defense are the New England Patriots. Specifically, they're very weak against quarterbacks and tight ends, so I think it could be a big-time Trey McBride, Kyler Murray connection game here. Maybe we finally get Trey McBride a receiving touchdown. Drake May and Pop Douglas and any other Patriots receivers, Hunter Henry versus the Arizona defense, they've been playing a lot better as of late. So a little bit of a concern there, but I actually do still not mind Drake May as a streaming quarterback if you guys are down bad at quarterback or whatever the case is. Marvin Harrison versus Christian Gonzalez is something that we're going to get in this game. Harrison has scored a touchdown literally every other game this season. He did not score last week, which means he's going to be on pace to score this week. But regardless, it's a tougher matchup for him against Christian Gonzalez. Both running backs are definitely in your lineup. They have above average matchups. Stevenson getting all the work, Connor getting all the work. Those guys are both RB2s this week. And then stream the Arizona defense and both kickers. Even though I like Drake May and I think he can put up a decent performance in this one, he's still a young quarterback. He takes sacks behind a bad offensive line, and he could turn the ball over, and the Cardinals have been pretty opportunistic on defense. So Colts at Broncos, the next game that we're going to talk about here. We have the Colts 4-point road favorites here. This is also the battle of the horses, the Colts versus the Broncos. The over-under is set at 44 points, ninth highest on the slate. The pace of play is the fastest on the slate, so maybe we get a little bit of a higher scoring game as a result. The Broncos in Mile High have been very, very strong. They've been a consistent team, just, closing out wins and that kind of thing. Bo Nix, Cortland Sutton versus the Indianapolis pass defense profiles quite well for both of those two guys. So you're definitely going to be starting Sutton, but also I have Bo Nix as a top 10 quarterback. I would start Bo Nix over Jared Goff, over Brock Purdy, over Baker Mayfield, over a number of different guys that you would probably assume I would not start Bo Nix over. He is a great, great start this week at home versus an easy pass defense. Anthony Richardson, a little bit more of a risky start because he is Anthony Richardson, but he does run. We know that about him. Michael Pittman Jr. is expected to get the Patrick Surtain treatment, which means that Josh Downs probably steps into the number one target role. And I mean, he's been that all year for the Colts. He's actually led the team in targets all season. But at the same time, he is coming off of an injury, and we'll see how that shoulder issue affects him. I think he's going to end up playing. I don't think it's going to be really an issue. He's already practicing this week. But Josh Downs could be a crucial part of this game. Jonathan Taylor versus the Broncos defense, they're about league average, so a decent matchup for him there. And then the Denver running backs, whoever it ends up being, Jaleel McLaughlin actually led the team in carries last week, or 2 weeks ago before the bye. Javonte Williams scored the touchdown. Audric Estime is getting mixed in. I probably would not mess with Javonte or McLaughlin or anybody if you have to. I would probably go with McLaughlin, to be honest, because he's the one who's looked the best and gotten the most explosive carries. But if you don't have to play a Denver running back, don't do it. And then if you're looking for a defense, I think the Denver Broncos defense and kicker are both good options here. At home versus a turnover, mistake-prone quarterback, I think is a good recipe for them. So Bills at Lions, a whopping 54.5-point over-under. This is the highest of the entire season so far that I've seen. 2.5-point home favorites are the Detroit Lions. Both teams implied for over 26 points. The over actually catching some of the steam as well. Detroit's DVOA and Buffalo's DVOA both well in the positives there. So this is going to be a shootout most likely. If it is not a shootout, that would be a major disappointment because honestly, just these are probably, for my money, the two best teams in the NFL in their respective conferences. So I just want to see these guys do battle at their absolute best. Both quarterbacks, though, do have bottom 8 matchups as far as, adjusted fantasy points allowed to the quarterback position. James Cook, difficult matchup. Conversely, David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, very easy matchup. So I could see this game going classic Detroit Lions style where the opponent just has the life sucked out of them by their run game. And David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, if you guys have those guys in your fantasy matchups, I would feel very, very good about them. James Cook, not so much, but I do think he could get more involved in the receiving game this week. Both wide receiver cores have above average matchups as well. So I think given the scoring environment here, the over-under, you're going to be starting Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Amari Cooper, Khalil Shakir, anybody that you can get into your lineup this game makes sense to do so. Laporta and Kincaid both have very difficult matchups for the tight end position. It appears Kincaid should be back on track to come back. Sam Laporta obviously still kind of been dealing with some stuff as well. You can start both of these guys. I think I have both of them as top 13 to 14 tight ends, but I don't think either of them are must starts. I think this one's going to run through the run games and the receivers. And then the kickers, I mean, you got to start Bass and Bates, just given the over-under of 54.5 points. Both of them are top 6 kickers in my rankings this week. Bucks at Chargers. This one's very, very important for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because we are currently in the lead in the NFC South. And given that the Falcons are playing the Raiders on Monday night, we want to keep that to be the case here. And the Falcons, because they swept the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they need to be a win ahead of them, Tampa Bay. So this is an important game going on the road to Los Angeles. The Chargers are not an intimidating home team by any means, but they are 3-point favorites. They do have a good defense. And the Buccaneers have struggled against defenses like this with really good fronts. So the Bucs and Chargers, some of the key matchups to pay attention to: Justin Herbert, Ladd McConkey, Quentin Johnson. I don't care that Justin Herbert's hobbled a little bit with an ankle injury. He is a absolute must play in this game. The Bucs are 32nd against fantasy quarterbacks and 26th against fantasy wide receivers, which averages out to about 28th between the two of them. Ladd McConkey, assuming he's healthy, is in this game. I don't think you'd have to dig deep on Quentin Johnson, but he's a half-decent flex play as well. Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans, Jalen McMillan, those guys have tougher matchups. Evans and Mayfield most likely, Evans for sure, but Mayfield most likely in your lineup. But I do have him just outside of QB1 range. And like I said, if you have Tua, Jordan Love or Bo Nix or somebody like that, I would be okay sitting Baker Mayfield for some of those options. Both running backs have bottom 10 matchups, and we also are still awaiting the health status of Bucky Irving. So if Irving is playing, which I think he will play, he just might be limited to some degree. That's a slight upgrade to Rachaad White, a slight downgrade to Bucky Irving. They both probably average out as, low-end RB2 type of plays, especially against this defense. And then, Gus Edwards, he's been okay. He's going to get touchdown opportunities if they get into the red zone, but the Bucs have been a lot better on defense, specifically against the run, in the last couple of weeks since getting healthy up front. If you're looking for a tight end, Cade Otton is a half-decent streamer. The Chargers defense has the 16th easiest matchup against Tampa Bay. Baker Mayfield is always capable, especially on the road against a tough defense, of throwing some interceptions, of taking some sacks, so definitely keep that in mind, and both kickers definitely in play for this one. So closing out the 4 p.m. slate, we have the Steelers at Eagles. The Eagles 5.5-point home favorites. The under catching a little bit of the steam. This over-under is pretty low. This Battle of Pennsylvania might end up being defense, might end up being the run games that are the catalyst for it, because both Jalen Hurts and Russell Wilson have bottom 5 matchups. These are two of the best pass defenses in the NFL. Najee and Warren, very difficult defensive matchup on the ground against the Eagles. The Steelers, without George Pickens, and presumably he is going to be out for this game, are going to have a really tough time moving the football. I think that the Eagles will cover the 5.5 points, and Saquon Barkley will probably have a Saquon Barkley game. We were all expecting him to have a bigger game last week against the Panthers. I think this is the game where he just 30 bombs it and, makes him mega chalk entering Best Ball Mania Week 16 pods, because I think Barkley going up against the Steelers is going to be heavily motivated to take this one home for his team. And I think, given the recent comments of A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts, the passing game is probably going to struggle in this one. If you're looking for, tight end options, I think Freiermuth and Calcaterra are half-decent streamers. I don't think you should have to dig that deep. Freiermuth especially is the only one that I'd really feel comfortable with, especially with George Pickens out of the lineup, but they are streaming options nonetheless. And then if you are looking for a defense, I think Philadelphia's defense, again, at home versus Russell Wilson without George Pickens, he could take some sacks, he could throw some interceptions, and Chris Boswell definitely a viable kicking option as well. Packers at Seahawks. This is the Sunday night game for Collinsworth and Tirico. This could be a preview of current playoff seeding right now, because the Seahawks are a division leader. The Packers are going to be a high wild card. We could eventually see this later on into January, but the Packers are 2.5-point road favorites against the Seahawks, who, as we know, have one of the best home field advantages in the league. If the Seahawks win this game, they're virtually guaranteed to win the NFC West, and I think that, honestly, I like kind of the home dog mentality here. Over under of 46 points. The over is catching mega steam right now. It is the highest amount of steam, sharp money versus public betting money that we're seeing on any single over under on the slate. So I really like this game to be a good fantasy friendly game environment. Jordan Love, Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, anybody in the Packers receiving core, they have the 18th easiest matchup versus the Seahawks. Geno, JSN, Metcalf versus Green Bay, a little bit of a tougher matchup, but they should still be able to get some things done. And then depending on if Kenneth Walker plays, which it appears as of now, many of the fantasy doctors I follow do not think he is going to play. It is probably going to be Zach Charbonnet yet again for the Seattle Seahawks at running back. Again, keep that in mind that these guys play at 8:20 p.m., so you might not have another option but to sit Kenneth Walker, depending on if you have Charbonnet or if you have any pivot options on Monday. Just keep that in mind, because I know in one league that I'm in, I have Kenneth Kenneth Walker, and I have absolutely no pivot options. So I might have to sit him for like Cedric Tillman or somebody on my bench if I don't hear better news before Sunday Night Football, or at least before 1 p.m. kickoff for that game. So hopefully we get some news on Kenneth Walker. As of now, I would imagine he's going to be out, and it's going to be Charbonnet yet again. Josh Jacobs versus the Seahawks run defense, pretty easy matchup there. We did see James Conner struggle a little bit, but the Arizona Cardinals just in general kind of struggled against this defense last week. And then if you're looking for a tight end, Tucker Kraft, definitely a very, very good option this week. I have him as a top 8 tight end, and then both kickers definitely in play for this one. So like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, doubleheader on Monday Night Football, Chicago Bears at Minnesota Vikings, 8 p.m. Eastern kickoff, and the next game, 8:30 p.m. Eastern kickoff. I don't know why they wouldn't space them out more, but whatever. The Vikings are 7-point home favorites here, over under of 43.5 points. Pace of play, not great. But we do see the Bears and Vikings. There is some highlight matchups that we have to talk about. The passing game for the Bears is in a pretty good spot. Caleb Williams, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Romo Dunze. In totality, the Vikings defense has been exploitable. Now, against certain positions, they're a little bit better against quarterbacks, a little bit better against number 1 receivers, because they are intending, based on the matchup charts that I have here. DJ Moore versus Stephon Gilmore in shadow coverage could mean down performance for DJ Moore, up performance for Keenan Allen and for Romo Dunze. Justin Jefferson on the other side of things is expected to see shadow coverage versus Jalen Johnson. And the Vikings versus the Bears pass defense is not a favorable matchup. And as you can see there, Aaron Jones is the guy in this Vikings offense that has the best matchup on the field. And same goes for TJ Hawkinson. So maybe we get a little bit of a disappointing game from Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison after the explosion that they had last week. Sam Darnold as well, I don't think is an absolute must start. I do think this could be an Aaron Jones game, could be a TJ Hawkinson game. DeAndre Swift, conversely, on the other side, not a great matchup for him. I don't think you have to start him by any means. Roshan Johnson may be back for this game, coming back from the concussion as well, which takes a dent out of DeAndre Swift's workload as well. So this is going to be an interesting game. Obviously, NFC North matchup, Vikings are at home, so you'd like them to put up points. But given the way that the Bears defense has played, I can't really count on them just having a monster performance. So the second Monday Night Football game that we have here is the Atlanta Falcons at the Las Vegas Raiders. The Falcons are 4-point road favorites. This is a matchup very crucial to Atlanta. If they don't win this game, they're going to lose the NFC South most likely. The Raiders are a little bit feisty, especially at home. Desmond Ridder is going to be the quarterback because both Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew are now out for the season. The over-under is set at 44.5. Key matchups to pay attention to. Both quarterbacks have top 10 matchups, so this should be a game where Kirk Cousins can start to play better. I mean, he's played so bad the last couple of weeks. Bijan Robinson versus the Las Vegas Raiders is an easy matchup for him. This could be a monster game for Bijan, if we're being honest here. If you guys are in a Week 15 matchup and you go up against Bijan Robinson, I would imagine you're going to not feel comfortable unless you're up like 35 points going into Monday Night Football, because Bijan has the potential to have a monster game here. Sincere McCormick, who has been named now the starting running back of the Raiders, if you guys missed that news, it dropped yesterday. He has a tough matchup going up against the Falcons, but it appears he is going to get all the carries now, or most of the carries now, going forward for the Raiders, because Madison sucks and Zamir White has been out, or is out for the rest of the season. Jacoby Myers versus the Atlanta Falcons secondary is an easy matchup. I like Jacoby Myers to have a lot of catches in this game. Could be a sneaky PPR play here. Not even sneaky at this point. He's just been good all year. And then Drake London and Darnell Mooney versus the Las Vegas secondary is a little bit of a tougher matchup. We saw London really have a weak game last week, whereas Mooney was the one that had the performance. Brock Bowers, of course, he's tight end 1. He's in your lineup no matter what. He has the 13th easiest defense here, so a little bit of a below average matchup for him. And then if you're looking for a defense and kicker option, I think Atlanta's is a decent one. So again, a little bit longer of a video. I'm going to speed through the streaming quarterbacks, tight ends, defenses, and kickers because, of course, there is no more buys, so streaming quarterbacks and tight ends not nearly as relevant anymore. Streaming quarterbacks to go after, again, if you have Brock Purdy, if you have Patrick Mahomes, if you have one of these quarterbacks that you think should be an every week starter, I would say go check your waiver wire for Tua Tagovailoa, Justin Herbert, and Bo Nix, because all of those guys are top 10 plays for me, and I do think I would start them over some other big-name options. If you are weak at quarterback and you want to dumpster dive to the waiver wire, Matthew Stafford is my favorite streaming option, and also if you have to dig a little bit deeper than that, Aaron Rodgers and Drake May are good options as well in their respective matchups. Streaming tight ends to go after, Tucker Kraft is the cream of the crop here. I don't think he's available in many leagues, but he is a great play this week. If you got the stones, the cojones for it,
it. Kyle Pitts is a great matchup, man. And I know he's been super, super disappointing, but he has performed when he has good matchups. Zach Ertz, my favorite streamer, probably the most trustworthy of the two there. Going up against the Saints, I think he has a chance to catch a touchdown, catch a couple passes. And then Pat Freiermuth, with no George Pickens, presumably, could have a lot of targets in that game. So streaming defenses, streaming kickers, my top 5 streaming defenses on the week. Minnesota Vikings versus Caleb Williams on Monday night. Ravens versus Tommy DeVito. Again, it's Tommy DeVito and they're 14.5-point favorites. Denver Broncos at home in Mile High versus Anthony Richardson. That's a good matchup there. Washington Commanders, 7-point road favorites against Jake Haener and the Saints. And then Kansas City Chiefs. Need I say more than Jameis Winston on the other side of the ball, who is notoriously throwing a lot of pick sixes these days. And then streaming kickers to go after Cameron Dicker of the Chargers, Tyler Bass of the Bills, and Jason Sanders of the Miami Dolphins. So that is going to close out the Matchups That Matter segment of this video. When you guys are watching this, will be on my way to the big T-Dot to go watch the Leafs and Ducks play tonight. So I will not be on the live stream. Danny will be soloing that. Thank you guys to all of you who have submitted questions so far over on the site. If you want to go ahead and do that, link down below in the description. But my picks for tonight, since I won't be on the stream to give them, Kyren Williams, 0.5 rushing touchdowns. I mean, he's had a rushing touchdown in 70% of his games this year, even higher of a percentage dating back to last year. I like them to it's going to be a high-scoring game. It's a 49-point over-under. Kyren Williams has rushed a touchdown in each of the last 3 games. I like him to find the end zone. Matthew Stafford, 241.5 passing yards. Most books have this set 245, 246, so I just think this one's underpriced, and Stafford has gone beyond this total in 6 of his last 7 games. And then Juwan Jennings, 7 targets or more. He's had 7 targets or more 4 of his last 5 games. And the first time they played the Rams, he had 12 targets and 3 touchdowns in that game. So I feel pretty good about him there. So if you want to tail the pick'em entry that I just built out, it was over on my TikTok. If you guys want to check that out over there, link is down below in the description. Head on over to underdogfantasy.com. Link down below in the pinned comment to get started. Promo code FSE gets you up to $1,000 in bonus cash on your first sign up and deposit. And you'll get this new customer free pick, Brock Purdy, higher than half a total yard to add into this entry. And if it hits, it would be a 10x of your original money instead of a 6x of your original money without that Brock Purdy free square. So definitely check that out if you guys are interested. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new around here. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.